Hi folks, good afternoon. I'm Ed Conson. I'm a digital learning specialist here at Boston Public Schools, and I'm here with Lauren Barry. Hi Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Barry. I'm the Online Blended Learning Program Manager with the Expanded Learning Department.
We're here as part of the Transforming Learning with Technology initiative, in which we rolled out a series of Chromebooks and iPads to many teachers at many different schools. I'm really excited to bring you some snippets of learning around some hot topic technology issues and to support you throughout the year and in your continued learning. So this series has been part of an ongoing one where you have the opportunity to check into a learning series and also connect with your peers with our workplace, Facebook Workplace social media group. So if you have not checked into the workplace, please do. We look forward to your participation. We're here today to talk about blended learning. And Lauren, this is a topic that has been on the minds of educators ever since technology has been sort of a thing in schools. So we're excited to sort of help you wrap your head around some blended learning issues and maybe even try some things out in your own classroom to make it work for you. So again, thank you for joining us today, and we're here to sort of talk about blended learning, and we have been talking about blended learning, as I said, for some time in education. And I remember in our first 21st Century Schools video came out, and we were all excited about this new exciting thing about what it means to have 21st century skills. So we're going to try to talk about what blended learning is today and why we do it in the classroom, as well as some specific strategies for taking that risk and taking that leap and doing it. And I'm going to finish up this evening's broadcast with a discussion of sort of what competencies and what mindsets it takes to be a blended learning teacher. So let's dive right into it. A blended learning is a simple definition, and we'll get into that. There's really no one definition, but I guess one thing is that it's an integration of face-to-face learning experiences along with online learning experiences. And we've had many opportunities to look at technology as a way to integrate those experiences through online learning content, as well as the many uses of the internet and web tools for communication, collaboration, and learning. So, as I said, I don't think we really have one universal definition, but when we talk about blended learning, we're really talking about the combination of online and face-to-face instruction. Online can mean many different things to people. It could be a simple thing of accessing a thing like Khan Academy. It could also be working collaboratively with students on creating a podcast or writing a blog article. There's so many levels of working online that the definition is really open to interpretation. But what we do know about it, as any good teaching, that it's intentional and it's integrated, and it uses data to identify the needs of our students. And that's sort of a basic definition. The blend really depends on the need of the individual student. So another way to look at blended learning is that with a robust internet available in schools and in most of our communities, it's about accessing content anywhere, anytime. And that's been one of my favorite phrases, this asynchronous opportunity to learn. The student who is missing school can have access to content outside of the classroom. The student who wants to catch up on some skills or even curiously investigate other topics has access to teacher-generated content or even online curriculum content that their school has purchased or teacher has directed them to. A good blended learning experience really does focus on small group instruction, the integration of digital content, the ability to differentiate for all learners, and again is data-driven. So Lauren, we want to ask that question about blended learning and why we do it. So I'm just going to stop for a second and look to you for a second. You've been at this for a little while. Why would teachers want to blend learning when, the traditional model in education has worked and many teachers are very comfortable in their role at the center of the classroom and chairs and rows? Why would we want to change that up?
Well, I think that the biggest reason is that traditional classroom instruction has worked for some kids, right? And so I think that a lot of us have been in a position where, we're doing the best that we can to differentiate for our kids, and we're really only hitting like that middle third, right? There's always going to be that third that wants to go faster or go above and beyond, or they're really looking for those enrichment opportunities. And there's always going to be that third of kids who need more time, who need more practice, but we've got to move on, right? And so we're really bound by these like standards and this content. And so how do we provide a way for kids to get exactly what they need at exactly the time that they need it without cloning every teacher and having, one-on-one?
So teachers can't just say to somebody that they taught the subject, therefore they've done their job. But the real emphasis on classroom work these days is on learning, and not just for, as you said, a third of the students or the middle ground of students, but for every individual student. And the goal, it seems, the buzzword these days is to personalize and treat students as clients. Maybe you can tell us some of the models and some of the things that you've looked at that help us achieve that, Lauren.
Yeah. And it really is about being more learner-centric, right? We're not looking at students as like a whole anymore. We're looking at them as individuals. So I think we've all experienced sort of the classroom of the past. It's based on a pretty old school factory model, right? And kids are in rows, the teacher's at the center, the teacher's the originator of the knowledge, and the students receive the knowledge, right? And that is really based on that old factory model. In general, we're talking about, we're teaching to the middle of students. So if most of the class gets what we're putting down, then we consider ourselves pretty successful, right? And also sometimes what we're doing is we're teaching to the test. If most of the students do well on the test, then we're pretty successful. And like I said, it is very teacher-centered. You see the teacher at the front of the classroom, maybe walking around a little bit, maybe there's some small group work, but really a lot of the instruction is resting on the shoulders of that teacher. So in the best scenarios in these classrooms of the past, teachers will differentiate their instruction. They'll make sure that they do different groupings, that they provide scaffolds to different students who maybe learn a little bit differently, for their ELL students, their special ed students. But at worst, what you're seeing is this picture on the left, where the teacher is lecturing, maybe writing on the board with their back turned sometimes to the classroom, and the kids are, 2/3 of them probably drifting off or looking at their cell phones. So
there's an engagement piece there as well that Definitely. I know that ISTE likes to talk about their ISTE for students and teachers, and one of the first thing is to engage all learners. And obviously one of these pictures really does show that the student is not engaged and the teacher is not engaging with the student.
Definitely, and we're not talking about poor intentions here, right? We're talking about what the teacher has the resources in the classroom to be able to provide for their kids. So even the best intentioned teachers, without growing an extra 10 arms, or like I said, cloning themselves, isn't really going to be able to move far beyond this.
So there's some flexibility that we have available to us with digital technologies in the classroom to be able to do what you say, to address all learners' needs.
Absolutely. And the classrooms of the future, we hope, are going to look really different from what these classrooms of the past have looked like. You're going to see more of the teacher instead of, we always hear the old sage on the stage. Instead of that, you see the teacher as a coach and as someone who is consulting with small groups or individual students in order to provide that individualized or personalized instruction. And those are a couple of buzzwords you're going to see coming up. There'll be a webinar later in the series about the difference between individualization and personalization, so stay tuned for that. But in general, technology can provide a lot of things that make for a more flexible and student-centered classroom. For one thing, it can provide instant data. So when you have students working in one of those online content providers like Khan Academy, or if you're a BPS teacher, which you are, Apex Tutorials or Acellus, or really anything. Some people use RazKids, Reading Eggs. It doesn't matter what your product is. Generally speaking, all of them are providing you instant data. And what that allows you to do is to instantaneously decide how to have flexible groups and who's in what group and who needs more help. The technology provides not a replacement for the teacher, but sort of an extra set of hands for the teacher. It frees up your hands in order to get down to those smaller groups or one-on-one instruction. As Ed already mentioned, it also provides opportunities like we've never had before for collaboration and for student self-exploration. So kids are really able to collaborate with each other in a very authentic way through maybe some of our Google tools, and they can actually create content like podcasts and wikis and all that, and blogs and all of those types of things. So it really makes for a more flexible classroom environment.
Oh, you're using words that really get me excited when I talk to teachers, Lauren, and that is about enhancement, how technology can enhance the classroom experience, and it opens up opportunities, and incorporating authentic tasks, problem-solving tasks, and authentic audiences in which students can share their work via a lot of different things with an audience that's not just their teacher anymore, but their peers in their classroom or their peers across the world too. And part of being a 21st century learner and part of blending learning is really taking advantage of the robust nature of our internet and connecting with people across the world as well.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at a couple of different models. So you'll see if you do an internet search of blended learning models or blended learning in general, you're going to see lots and lots of different ones come up. I put a few of them on here, like there's flex, there's a la carte, there's lab rotation, there's station rotation, there's flipped classroom. What it kind of comes down to is that there's no right model. As Ed mentioned, there's no right way to do blended learning. There's no right product to plug in. So, some people swear by 10Mark, some people swear by Khan Academy. And really what it comes down to is two things. One is what works for your kids, and specifically what works for individual kids. So maybe one kid loves Khan Academy and another kid just really isn't engaged by it. So how can we offer lots of opportunities, lots of options for our students so that they can get what they need and what it works best for them? The other thing to keep in mind is that it's okay to iterate. So if you are starting to use a product or you're starting to use a particular blended learning model and it's not working totally, it's fine to throw it out the window and try a different one. If it's working okay, but you want to tweak it, that's fine too. And if it's working perfectly, well then run with it. Here is one graphic that sort of displays a classic blended learning model in a little bit of a different way. So a lot of people start with something called the station rotation model, where students actually rotate between teacher-led stations, online stations, and collaborative group work. Now, some people do run this as a pretty rigid rotation where students spend a certain number of minutes on each station, but you can be very flexible with a station rotation model and have students sort of drifting in between the different stations or rotating basically when they're ready to. So if you picture this as a rotation starting with like a teacher kickoff of a new unit or a new topic, and then the students are actually moving to an online station where they're getting the bulk of the content. So students are learning at their own pace, they're moving through the online learning, and the online learning provider or the content platform is actually providing that instant data. So you can pull data that says these 5 kids are really struggling with fractions or something along those lines. And so what you could do is you could pull kids into a teacher-led small group or one-on-one in order to give them the support that they need, while the kids that are doing just fine and moving along as they're supposed to can maybe move on to a collaborative learning station where they're completing a project. Maybe they're pitching their own projects in order to demonstrate mastery. Maybe they are just coming together to do a group project that the teacher has identified. But in general, they're demonstrating mastery of what they've learned in the online learning station in a different way, in a way that's collaborative, in a way that kind of demonstrates things more creatively. But what's critical is that the teacher-led small groups, it becomes less of that teacher standing in front of the classroom and more of a where do I need to strategically pull kids for additional instruction or for coaching or for just kind of like goal setting in that collaborative station.
So there's a lot of flexibility in these rotation models, and one thing that stands out for me, again, as we talk about personalization of education and the classroom experience, that students have a choice in their projects and how they can engage with content and how they can represent their understanding and their knowledge of a particular topic.
Yeah, and that online learning station, that could be something like a Khan Academy or an Acellus or an Apex, or it could actually be teacher-created materials. So teachers can curate materials in like Google Classroom and kids can work through. So really anything that the kids can get the content, they can get the skills, and you can get the data that you need in order to provide that small group instruction. So that's really the key there. There's a buzzword that's out there also called playlists. So what you can do for your students in that initial goal setting is you can say, okay, here's what you need to learn. And they might say, okay, I learn best via video. So you create a little curated list of content for them or places that they can go to access that material that's tailored to what they need and what they want.
Wow, and we have tools that can do that. We have a YouTube channel as Boston Public Schools employees in our Google Apps for Education domain tools. And we have so many opportunities to curate resources. So wow, the teachers really have a lot on their plate, don't they? And I think it sounds like it's a bit more flexible for teachers. Instead of have all the pressure to stand in the center of the stage in the classroom, they can now facilitate and build relationships with students. So I think that it takes a lot of good skills for teachers to do the job well these days.
Yes, definitely. And really it's about creating a classroom culture that works in this model. It's about building those relationships and having the student know how to navigate this. So when a student enters your classroom, you've built these routines and they know this is where I need to go and this is what I need to do. And so that's just super important.
Great.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about other things that teachers need in order to be successful here.
All right, and that brings us to a brief discussion on teacher competencies. And again, as I pointed out at the beginning of this, Lauren, that you can Google it and see 5 teacher competencies that every 21st century educator needs, or 22 or 7. So it's still being discussed, which I find very exciting. It's still being developed. And the internet has changed the way we can teach. I remember just briefly, Man of the Year for Time magazine, how they put a cover of a special individual. They had a question mark in the center of it, or they said you, and it was the individual. Because the internet really does allow us, the Web 2.0 part of the internet allows us to be contributors and creators and not just consumers of knowledge. And that producing and creating is really one of the highest order thinking skills I think we're striving to achieve, and it provides the opportunity to reach those Bloom's higher order thinking skills. So what does a teacher need to be there? So here's that Google search that I alluded to earlier, that we have so many things being written about what the needs of the 21st century educator are. We like to go to Edutopia a lot for our teaching resources. It's a great resource. So let's break these down a little bit and pick out one of these resources. And this one, again, is from the INACOL framework for blended learning, and it's the teacher competencies, and it breaks them down into 4 big buckets, and we like things that are in buckets in general categories, and I'm going to focus on one, but just to mention the 4. Mindsets, that is, what can we do to how do we think about education, how do we entertain the ideas of change and looking towards the future, openness and flexibility. And what qualities we have as an educator. Are we compassionate? Are we creative? Are we taking risks? Being able to adapt to things we haven't learned yet, and being willing to try new things. And of course there's the basic technical skills. In Boston we have to learn how to use Aspen. We need to be familiar with Google, and as Lauren said, some of our online tools like Apex and Acellus are some special technical things. So once we get comfortable in these mindsets and these other categories, we're really ready to blend. And so let's look at some of those in a little bit more specifically. We have something like creating learning environments that are flexible and personalized. Well, what does that mean? That might mean something as using a Google Classroom as an online landing zone. We use that phrase a lot. It might be something where you do set up that station rotation model in your room by shifting desks around. And asking for student input on the structures is often a good thing, and listing them in your practice and in your decision making. So again, it's that shift from the teacher-led instruction to student-centered learning, and that's a big shift for some teachers. Giving up control is not an easy thing, but the the gains are certainly outweigh what you lose. The confidence that students develop by being in charge of their own learning, and the social learning that happens in the classroom creates for a good, strong community as well. So change is a factor in life, as it is in education. And even though some people may like the way things have been going on for a long time, we need the teacher mindset, the new educator mindset, to be one that embraces change and looks forward to what's happening, what's new, and what hasn't been invented yet. They certainly have to be ones that value collaboration, and as I said earlier, not just among students and for their sake as having 21st century skills, but for their own professional learning and skill development, to be able to collaborate with peers. And we have our colleagues next door, but we also have social media like Twitter and Twitter chats to connect with people who are like-minded and who are exploring the same topics that we do. And I won't go through each one of these, but it's that idea that we're providing resources, we're becoming curators of content using the internet. You mentioned the word playlist, and that is such a great concept. We all use playlists for our favorite music or our favorite videos, and we can create playlists for students also. We're creating a unit. We can have a playlist of audio files, video files, readings, PDFs, dramatizations, and virtual reality scenarios that can really give every student access to the content that we're trying to get them to become masters at. We're going to conclude our presentation here on blended learning. Lauren, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about how teachers can continue learning and find out more about blended learning? Because this webinar is as a good introduction to it from our point of view. Where else can teachers go to learn more about blended learning?
Yeah, and I think that just like we're trying to provide a buffet of options for our students in terms of how they learn, we'd like to provide a buffet of options for you in terms of how you would like to learn more about blended learning. So there are a couple websites if you're the sort of person who likes to just go poke around. Blendedlearning.org, blendmylearning.com, and then this last one is a blended learning toolkit. If you actually just Google search blended learning toolkit, that will come right up. But also, if you're the kind of person who prefers a little bit more of a structured environment, there are 2 free courses that you could access. One, if you search Khan Academy Blended Learning, there's a Khan Academy course for teachers, that's Blended Learning 101. And then there's also a course through Coursera, Coursera, and that is actually has like activities that you complete, and then several times a year there's an instructor behind it that can help you coach you through it. So depending on how you like to learn.
Folks, we do have our Workplace Facebook group that are for transforming learning with technology that we'd like to see you participate in. Again, it's a great place to get resources, to ask questions, and connect with colleagues. We look forward to seeing you there. Some of our colleagues right now are at Computer Science Social. They're getting together with other educators who are sharing ideas about effectively integrating more computer science and coding into our classrooms in all subjects. So we have those 21st century students who are ready to innovate in our upcoming, when they graduate. Please give us your feedback, ask any questions, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.